You escaped, didn't you?
You make it sound like I was in prison.
Weren't you?
No, but I left without telling anyone.
Why did you leave?
God expected too much of me.
Hello and welcome to another episode of the Dolby Institute and Soundworks Collection podcast. We're coming to you all remotely because we're still pretty much here in the US on COVID-19 lockdown. We're focusing this series of conversations on great sound for episodic streaming content, since that's what we're all at home enjoying right now. And we have a special episode today. I'm really thrilled to be speaking with the team in Berlin on the great Netflix show Unorthodox. And we're recording today using the Dolby On app. Dolby On is a free iOS and Android application which is designed to make recording and live streaming sound and video with unparalleled audio quality very simple, using nothing but your device. Dolby On empowers creators to make their statement with amazing sound quality anytime, anywhere. So, Unorthodox, gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us today and being on the Dolby Institute podcast and talking about this pretty amazing television show. We're joined today by Adrian Baumeister, who's the head of sound at Post Republic in Berlin. Hi, Adrian.
Hi, good evening.
Daniel Iribarren, the supervising sound editor and dialogue editor on the show. Welcome, Daniel.
Great to be here, thanks.
And by the way, you worked on one of my favorite movies from the last few years, A Fantastic Woman. I really love that picture.
Oh, great. Yeah, that was a lot of fun too.
Yeah. And Linus Nickel is the re-recording mixer on the show. Welcome to the show, Linus.
Thank you. Thank you for having us.
So I'm just curious, before we get started, I wanted to ask, kind of like, you know, here in the US, it's late June. We're sort of starting to come out of the coronavirus lockdown, but tell us about what's happening in Berlin. How have you guys been faring? What's happening with work? Or are you guys, I think you may be a little ahead of us on the curve so far.
Well, I've been in touch with my family back home, and yeah, we are a couple weeks ahead of you. So things are starting to loosen up a little bit. I think how it affected people's work is, I think everybody's had a different experience, but things are picking up again.
Yeah, so everything that usually happens before, like in terms of work, before the Cannes Film Festival is now just being shifted into the summer holidays, which is obviously a little bit complicated when you have families.
So Adrian, before we get into the creative on the show, tell us a little bit about Post Republic and the facility where you guys are, and how did Unorthodox come into the facility? So
Post Republic is a full, service post-production facility. So we cover sound, but also picture-related things. Unorthodox. I think it came through us through Director Maria Schrader, that we have worked on, we have worked with her before on.
She did Deutschland 83, right?
She did Deutschland 83, and she did also a feature that was quite critically acclaimed, the Stefan Zweig biopic. I think I forgot the name. I think she was the one pulling, or definitely wanted to work with us again, and we had the two editors, or the main editor, Hans-Jörg Weisbrich, who was also a regular at our facility. So I think it was a good match from the start, and they definitely helped pulling the project to Post Republic.
Daniel and Linus, how did you get involved with the project and come to work on Unorthodox?
I have a close relationship to the Post Republic. I don't work for them per se, but it was just a good fit, I think. I mean, my background is definitely more from feature film, coming from feature film, and they thought that would be a really good match for working with Maria, who also really comes from that background. And I think that was the reason for it. And it was I think it worked out quite nicely. I mean, Maria and I got along quite well, and we understood each other.
I'm a freelancing re-recording mixer, and I was asked by Post Republic to join the team because things had to be done quick. And Adrian had to do some other mixes as well. So we had to blow up the team a bit. And so that's why I came into the team. And I'm very glad that I was asked to do that. And Adrian and me, we met before the whole thing was going on. And we tried to fit our workflows as much as possible, so that I could do changes on his mixes and he as well could do changes on my episodes. And that worked very well, right, Adrian?
Yeah, maybe to clarify, we both worked on the show as re-recording mixes. So we kind of split the shows or the episodes in the middle. So I mainly worked on episodes 1 and 2. And Linus took over and finished 1 and 2 because there were some things that were still to be done, and then continued working on the episodes 3 and 4. But like Linus said, we met before. We kind of set up. We talked about style and also about how to put our workflows, combine our workflows, which are obviously individual. And that was really good to start like that, I think.
That's a really interesting way to approach it. So each of you was mixing dialogue and music and effects. You were each mixing on the console by yourselves.
Mm-hmm.
Was that a function of just a tight post-production schedule? Were you both mixing at the same time, or why? I'm just curious why you decided to approach it that way instead of, one mixer working on dialogue and music and another mixer working on effects for all 4 episodes.
In Germany, we there's not so much maybe like in the US separation usually. So there's often one re-recording mixer just covering everything. So and that might have been like the starting point why this happened. The thing why we split up the work is really because the schedule was so tight. So when we were still working on episode 2, 3 had started, and we could be notes came back, so we had to go back to the episodes. So everything was kind of overlapping and into each other. So I guess that's why we decided, okay, let's separate episodes and work like that, kind of strict. So and yeah. I don't know, Linus, do you want to add something?
As you said, time was a factor. So, and time was always something we thought about with all decisions. But yeah, as you said, Glenn, as you said before, I think it would be impossible to split completely between dialogue, effects, and music, because the music wasn't ready, so it was everything was in the process and came some from somewhere in the world and was just mixed in as hot as it was, and so it was I don't know how to say it. It was rough, but at the end everything went good.
It's fascinating to hear you say that, because my experience of watching the show is that it's so from a sound standpoint, it seems so careful and deliberate and well thought out, which is a great segue. Let's talk about creative. Unorthodox is obviously the story of our main character Esty, who is living at the beginning of the show in an ultra-Orthodox Hasidic Jewish community in the Williamsburg section of Brooklyn in the U.S. And as we see very quickly in the first episode, she escapes what's a pretty repressive environment for a woman and goes to Berlin for reasons that we learn later on. So the 4 episodes of the show kind of alternate, move back and forth between the Hasidic community in Brooklyn and a much more cosmopolitan, modern environment of Berlin. So can you talk a little bit creatively about how you went about making these 2 worlds sound very distinct and different from each other?
I think the initial conversations I had with Maria were really about that, and I think that was the key focus for the sound. It was really to kind of create these two distinct atmospheres, but without them it being really overpowering. And I think particularly in the first episode, really establishing both locations was key, basically, to set up the entire series. And we were fortunate also with both of our sound designers and Paul Risher, who had we had two, Sebastian Marshall and Paul Risher were two sound designers working on them, and we kind of working on the episodes, and we kind of split it up so that Paul would work on the New York locations, and Sebastian would work on the Berlin locations. Both are also location recordists, and Paul had a library of sounds that he had just recorded in Brooklyn a year prior. Well,
that's handy.
Yeah, which was fantastic. Like it was done, and Sebastian is. I mean, he's always roaming around Berlin, taking basically getting sounds, and he has a plethora of sounds from Berlin. So like the authenticity was there. So that was basically the background, and which I think was very effective and very authentic. And that was the main thing for Maria, is that she really wanted it to seem very natural, very authentic, authenticity was really the key. And so that was it. And then there was lots of then we can keep going in terms of how we kind of decorated those atmospheric elements, but interestingly, really a lot of sounds that we had Sebastian and Paul record themselves. So a lot of things that were done specifically for these episodes, and I think that was I think you hear it. Yeah, I think you feel it and hear it.
With the beginning of the show, I learned to understand how Maria wanted to present these different worlds as accurate as possible, especially the Jewish community over there. And nobody of us, and especially me, had an idea how it would be to be there and how it would be the feeling. And so I spent I don't know, half an hour at the beginning of the first episode just talking with her about her experience to shoot there and to be there and to do the research in the streets and how that felt to her. And I think all the weeks that was I could remember this half hour, because I always had in mind, okay, that's the feeling she wants to recreate. And that's all we tried all the time, just to be accurate about that, especially in the New York and Jewish part of the episodes.
Well, I'm curious, what did Maria, what was she directing you to do, and maybe a little bit more specifically, what is the sound of that Hasidic neighborhood? What are the audio elements that you guys use to build that world?
I mean, the one thing, a key thing that always kind of came back was the harbor. So it's kind of close to I think Hudson River. So that it has like always ships, and we have some seagulls, I think, outside, and we have also a couple of establisher shots where we can see the water. And there was always, especially in interior scenes, there was a discussion like how much do we want to let in from outside? So how much should blend in, or how isolated should this world be? And this was a fine line. So there were a lot of sounds that were like kicked out because they were too obvious or like, didn't fit the mood. But if you listen carefully to those interior scenes when the family is sitting there, or when they talk to the rabbi, You can hear a lot of or a few delicate like horns and stuff like that, stuff waving in. So to create that sense, which is also, it's not just traffic sound that you would normally sense or like guess if you have a New York, like, you know, like traffic and ambulances and police. But it adds a nice tone, I think, to it.
One of the things that I wanted to ask you guys about was within the scenes in Brooklyn, you really get a sense of how, especially with Esty and her husband, how much the eyes of the community are upon them and how closely they're being watched. One of my favorite sound moments in the show, and it's really subtle, but I think it's the wedding night, and it's the first time that they go to bed together, and you can hear conversations from the neighbors coming in through the wall, and it really reinforces how oppressive that community is and how much on top of them they feel like the community is. I thought that was a wonderful touch.
Things like that were definitely things that Maria had her hand in. I mean, every location was extremely important for her to kind of give that a setting and give that an environment. And so there were always things coming through walls and all these subtleties that you felt. And it's great that you can hear them. You know, we put these things in, and you never, you know. Yeah,
it definitely had a desired effect.
Yeah, but I mean, just as a workflow addition, and a lot of it was one of these shows where I think everybody was pulling the same strings somehow. So it's really, the picture was so rich, and so a lot of the sounds, they weren't even really talked through before. I think, I mean, like there was definitely talking about sound with the director, but a lot of the sounds they were inspiration by the sound designers, and most of it really made it into the final mix because it was everything, you know. So every time Maria had the idea, shouldn't we hear that? You know, like it was there usually because it was like kind of obvious, but in a good way. So because the storytelling was very clear and the drama was very clear. And the pictures were just rich, and sound was also always used also already in editing, so in ways that you could jump on, you know. For example, I don't know, like comical elements when the father is on the phone and he goes out and talks, and when they're standing in this at the piano teacher's place, you know, and they have this weird conversation there. So a lot of these things that really played with the sound and with they were already there. So it was really fun also to jump on that, and really one of these shows where really you had to feel everyone's going into the same direction and have the same feeling towards it.
I can remember one scene, the club scene, and I was working with Maria on it, and she always said, there's one guy, could we hear something from him? And I was just had to look into the Waller loop groups, and blop, one popped out. It was exactly this guy. And then she said 3 seconds later, "Oh, there's another one. Could we have something for him?" And whoop, there it was. And she was really, really surprised. She said to me, "I'm a magician with a big head and just flipping out the right voices for these guys." And it was very prepared. I didn't have to do anything with me. I just had to find it. And then there it was.
But you know what's interesting about Maria is that she probably downplayed that, because I'm pretty sure she specifically asked for those people to be done. And so she was, she was downplaying it a little bit. It sounds like that. Well, I just wanted to kind of, at some point, give a shout out to Patrick Feiger, who recorded, who did all the on-set recordings, who did a phenomenal job. I mean, Maria's a real stickler for sound, and she has an ongoing relationship with him, and he provided us with, just oodles of tracks and everything that we could possibly use from on set. And there were a lot of complicated scenes, like the wedding scene, and that he basically gave us coverage, like more than adequate coverage. And I just wanted to give him a shout out and kudos.
That's great. I was going to ask you about the production tracks and how was the state of things that came to you guys to work with?
Well, it was great. I mean, it was really, he was very, very thorough. And I got a sense that he was given the freedom to work, basically. Like there were microphones for everything, and he always had everything that I thought I needed in the same way was there. And several, I think on several shoots they had a B crew getting atmospheres, and all of these things we had coordinated. I mean, we're fortunate enough to be talking about this before they went to shoot. So we had talked through a lot of the more complicated scenes. And Patrick definitely, he definitely came through. Everything was great. Like, it really sounded very good.
So Daniel, I just wanted to follow up on that. So you were actually hired on the show before they went to shoot?
Well, hired? No. I mean, I was. Yes. I mean, I was asked to super the job, and subsequently went to some pre-production meetings. Actually, a slew of them. With Antonio to discuss the music and deliveries, and so I was involved in a lot of that process, really, and also because I have some experience working on Netflix schedules. Which was useful, particularly with regards to ADR planning and that sort of thing. So I was quite early in the project, probably about a month before they started shooting, and had discussed really, not with Maria at that point, but really with Patrick, how what the best way to approach certain scenes were. And
it's fantastic that you had that access. So you were able to make requests and ask for them to get specific items for you, and that's great.
Yeah, more than that, I mean, it wasn't me so much making requests. It was really also Patrick asking me, what is it that you guys like, and what is it that you need, and just having that conversation before you go into a shoot is fantastic, because then you know what to expect. And something that doesn't often happen, at least not in the feature film world. Just because the schedules, at least here, are so elongated. They're just so much longer. We get.
How much of the show was actually shot on location in Brooklyn? Was it just exteriors, and then the interiors, even for the houses and the Hasidic Jewish scenes, were those shot back in Berlin, or was all that stuff done on location in the States?
Just the exteriors in New York, and then the wedding. The wedding was also done here, I believe. The wedding was here in Berlin. So I think it's just only the exteriors, and all the interiors were done either in studios here or in sets.
There's a really we were talking about kind of the sound of the people around and the oppression. There's a beautiful moment that I love in episode 1 when Esty and Yankee meet for the first time. They've been match made by the community, and they meet for the first time, I believe, at his home. She's brought over, and they're given a few minutes alone in the dining room, and there's like a glass sliding door that's shut, and you can hear all the relatives kind of chattering outside, but then the glass door shuts, and it's this beautiful moment of quiet when they're finally alone together for the first time, and neither of them really knows what to say to each other. And it was just a beautiful moment. I thought you guys just echoed their uncomfortableness so beautifully with the sound design in the mix.
Mijn tante had geen meer meegemaakt maar een bredere scan in Europe nog bij zich.
Dat sounds exciting.
In zo'n bezicht ik voor hem van alle grootste tzadikim.
Bist gegangen all the way to Europe in a snargesenk voor. Gar nicht anders.
Ik heb gewollt. Maar mijn tante had niet gelast.
It's also one of my favorite moments, sound moments in that episode. But again, it's something that is not only an idea of the sound, but it's an idea that is already done in the script. Basically, you can already think about the sound, and it was always like that. And then we find the right balance, and of course the right voices. And then when we cut into that room, and so it's. And it was something that it took some time to find that balance and that intimacy moment, but that's like I said, it's also one of my favorite moments, because
if I remember correctly, I think those and correct me if I'm wrong, Adrian, but we did have also, there were location sound recordings for those conversations. All of that stuff was thought out when they shot. I believe we did a little ADR as well. We did some loop group as well. I can't quite remember, but I do remember there being, things coming from the set.
I really appreciate you guys saying that, because one of the things that we talk about on this podcast a lot is filmmakers who think about sound from the beginning of the creative process, like what you're describing, like a beautiful sound treatment like that. And it's not, one of the things I love about it is sometimes on this show, we tend to talk about kind of big, explosive science fiction shows and all that kind of stuff, which is all great fun from a sound perspective. But I really wanted to talk with you guys about this show because the sound work is so subtle and so specific and doesn't necessarily call attention to itself, but it's really lovely. And to, what you were describing about that particular sequence with the closing of the door and the voices through it, to your point, she has to be thinking about that at the writing phase, at the shooting phase, to give you guys room to execute that in a way that's really wonderful.
I think just in general, the nature of the sound, the nature of what we were doing needed to be subtle because it's a very dialogue-driven series, and there was no, we don't have any explosions or we don't have anything
there's no car chases,
quite like that.
Right?
Yeah, there's nothing really like that, so we had to be a lot more subtle in how we approached it, and again, Maria had given a lot of thought, and a lot of her storytelling really does have to do with sound and how these things play out, what's happening off screen, what's happening on screen. And often, I remember meetings with her really just to go over the ADR and loop groups. It would just take forever because she always had something to tell that was happening off, either from the right side or the left side, or something that was happening in the room next door. And yeah, and she had very specific ideas.
And how are you able to accomplish that and place those sounds like behind the wall in the room next door? Was that basically just an EQ and a reverb mix trick, or did you guys do any kind of worldizing around those tracks, or how did you execute that?
I think in this case it was really done with an EQ and like a sort of muffling, but I definitely know that that for the exterior shots we did some like it was mainly Sebastian Marshall who did some like location recording, especially for this show, and for like cars passing with music, which we used a few in New York and also in Berlin. Just to to have this kind of this sense of urbanity and I don't know, just and these were like he used this worldizing technique, so he like really put something in a car and let it pass and recorded it. So
yeah, he put a subwoofer in his car and then had somebody drive it around for with music that I believe he produced himself.
Yeah. So no problem on that side either, the right side. Yeah,
that's funny. So I was asking about the music and sort of what was the style and tone of the music, and how did that fit in with what you were doing from a sound editing perspective?
There was on one side there was the idea of like supporting the drama, and even like in terms of like cliffhanging at the end of an episode. So there was always like a kind of a technique or a style that was like added to that. So the pace should go up, and but the storytelling sometimes was just a bit different, like in how it was the ideas that came from the editing. So this was there were just decisions and like muting stuff, moving around stuff, and taking out a lot of we got a lot of stems, and we used a lot of stems editing in the we edited a lot of stems in the mix just to support both ideas, maybe.
There were a lot of very delicate areas, and particularly I remember endless conversations about the opening sequence and how music was going to drive that, because in a way music really needed to drive, and that's when Esty is fleeing Brooklyn and she's on her way to the airport, and that
she's in the car and she's trying to hide her face as she's passing through the community,
and in that whole scene the music really kind of needed to drive that, but it couldn't overpower it either, and that was a very delicate thing, and I know that they went like back and forth, and I don't know what happened in the end because I wasn't around, but as there was somewhat of an experimental approach, I think, from what Antonio was telling me, that he would send them things and then, he'd have to kind of do it completely different. They were trying things out, basically.
JFK, right? What terminal?
5.
Is everything all right back there, miss?
Go the long way around Williamsburg, please.
Esty. Esty.
Maria said to me that she didn't want to have a music with too much cliches, especially the Jewish cliches in it. And also the production and showrunner, they all said the same, no much of cliches in it. And so the music was not separating between the Jewish part and the part in Berlin. And that gave space to us and to the sounds to explain where we are right now, and to bring these different places on sound. Like the music left this field open, and we could add that on the sound design.
Oh, that's interesting, because a lot of the way the show is structured, obviously, much of it happens in flashback, and you learn previous bits of Esty story. So, were you guys like, in order to make sure that the audience member, you know, the audience doesn't get confused, were there any sort of signature audio elements that you would introduce to let people know, oh, we're back in Brooklyn versus Berlin, or how did that work out?
Well, from what I remember, what we had discussed is I think every there was no signatures. There were certain sounds. We did a lot of car buys and you know, these type of musical elements that we were talking about, the worldized you know, car buys with music and these kind of things to make cuts. But I think they were all handled more on an individual basis. There wasn't any kind of real, you know, any one thing that was done.
Yeah, it would have become a cliche, obviously, if you had relied on that. Yeah.
Yeah, you know, I think there were a multitude of different things, but making the cuts was important, really, because you know, because we're going from, you know, Berlin to New York and coming back and you know, making those cuts and giving them little sounds and was quite important in establishing that.
Yeah, I mean, there's one interesting scene that I can mention, the one where Esty is the first time she's running, like walking around in Berlin and seeing all these things, and it's like parallel montage with Yankee looking for her. So we're always cutting back between New York and Berlin. And there were two things. So for one, it had to be like because they're both kind of searching for something. So they had to be storytelling wise, it was the same, the same emotion they were both in. So the sounds they were supposed to kind of interrupt that kind of mood that they were both in. But again, you know, we had to feel or to think, okay, now we're in Berlin, now we're in New York again. So I think we used some voices there. We used some characteristic subway sounds. So just to distinguish and to make sure that you. I mean, it was kind of a, you know, in a way, it was also nice that you kind of like a bit lost and not really know where you are. But I think it was, I remember it was a discussion on like how separate do we want this to sound, and then we ended up trying to combine both worlds, I think.
Yeah, there was some funny moments I remember with Maria, for instance, because, you know, we did typically as editors kind of do things systematically. You know, we're in Berlin, and now we cut to New York. But I remember Maria really kind of cheating that a lot and blending, you know, taking the New York atmosphere and putting it in. I mean, taking the Berlin atmosphere and putting it in New York. And I would ask her, well, why are you doing this? And she just liked the sound of something. There would be a cellist playing in the background or something, and she would just enjoy hearing that. And so it wasn't very systematic, but interesting anyway.
Well, but a lot of it is also memory. You know, Esty's having memories in Berlin of her time in Brooklyn. So thematically, you can get away with kind of mushing things a little bit, right?
Yeah. Well, we did, yeah.
So, you know, obviously, as we talk about it, a lot of it happens, the show happens in flashbacks, but there's sort of a big set piece, which is the wedding night and the big wedding ceremony. I'm sure that posed some challenges to you guys from an audio standpoint.
Push
The wedding. Where to start? We had, I remember the day before they were to shoot the wedding, I got a call from Patrick Feiger who needed me to stripe something like 16 pieces of music with SMPTE because they had just gotten the music in. And so they were, I think they were flying by the seat of their pants while they were shooting that. But again, everything was there. It was also, I think, Hans-Jörg, the editor, did a great job really splicing sequences together with the music so that they actually fit. So there wasn't too much tweaking to do there. I mean, it's obviously a complicated scene, but I think the groundwork was laid out in a very comprehensive way. So there wasn't a lot of guesswork, and we didn't really need to go back and do too much. Most of that scene is what was recorded while they were shooting, and some wild tracks. I think they'd done a bunch of wild tracks. They did some wild tracks. I mean, in terms of mixing, it was I think for me the most complicated sequence in the movie. Because there were just so many elements there. So and then also the way that the marriage is set up is that they, like when they for example when they dance, when they celebrate, they're all in different places. So the women they party apart from the men. So but the camera goes back and forth. So the challenge was to keep that kind of energy. But with changing the sound all the time and having different perspectives, but if you take everything down, then you lose the energy. So we were always thinking, okay, how loud is the music here? What do we hear there? Do we hear shouting? So I think a lot of this scene came together really. How it sounded came together in the mixing stage, and this was definitely also the longest shift that we that we had. Yeah, I remember it was like everything needed to be really separated in a way that everything that was on the woman's side and needed to be separated from everything that was on the man's side, because that was the key. That was the challenge for that scene, was to separate the two worlds, like to separate that room.
Kind of the heart and soul of the series comes at the very end during Esty's audition. And it's been this moment there's been a lot of buildup through the last couple of episodes, and triggered kind of a crisis of confidence for Esty, and so she switches and decides to sing at the last minute, and it's one of those scenes that so much is riding on it from the audience's perspective in terms of the stakes for Esty. And it's just a beautiful, very simple sequence of her singing that second song kind of unexpectedly at the audition.
Mi bon siach shoishan choichim Ahavas kalu mesois doidim Mi bon siach shoishan choichim.
Can you talk a little bit about the mix on that particular sequence, and what did you guys do to support the performance of the woman who played Esty?
First of all, we mixed it, I would say, as you should mix it, with a lot of reverb, and it was like to help her performance to get bigger. But then we reduced that a lot, just to be as much as intimate as possible. And after we did that, we recognized, we have to help her performance. And then we used all the technical tricks we could use to help her as much as possible. And I I don't want to say what we did exactly, because that destroys the magic on the moment there.
Well, whatever you did worked, because the moment, it's just a beautiful moment, and it fills you with a lot of hope for Esty's future.
Well, I think the performance was spectacular. I think that entire, I think there were they had 2 takes of that, and it was compiled basically from 2 takes, and I think her performance, at least visually, was fantastic, and actually the audio as well. I mean, she needed a little help with some tuning. But it was always a powerful.
Absolutely, and the spirit was there, and you couldn't create that with any technical things. The spirit was there, and the feeling, and she did that in this moment, and she felt it like that.
Yeah, I guess that was the challenge there. I mean, for me, again, as far as the editing was concerned, there wasn't much to do. That's what was there, and that was it was raw, and it needed to stay raw. And I guess finding a balance of this kind of rawness, and while at the same time helping it out a little bit was the key. But yeah, that was fun. That was a fun little sequence.
So I know that for most of you, you spend a lot of time, and the bulk of your work is on feature films. But I think for a lot of folks in the U.S. Who came out of a feature film background, they're starting to do more work on episodics. Linus, I know this is a special kind of interest for you, that you've written in the past on issues around adapting cinema mixes for broadcast. But is the approach artistically, creatively? How is the approach different for you guys when you know that something is going to originate for a broadcast or streaming audience as opposed to theatrically?
I think there's a huge difference to work for a streaming service or a broadcasting service. That makes a huge difference for me, because these mixes for the streaming services, it has to be, it's a mix which could be ready to be screened in a cinema. They should be ready, and they also should work at home on smaller devices. And you can expect that many listeners and viewers are really good prepared with huge LED, LCD TV installations and really good sound equipment. And so you have to deliver a mix which is capable for everything. Mm-hmm. And that's really different, a huge difference to the normal broadcast mix for me, in my perspective. So I would say there's more the difference between the normal broadcast mix and the streaming service mix as between the cinema mix and the broadcasting mix. So I don't know, should I go much deep into the technical dark side of it or not?
Probably not. I think that was a good answer to the question. Daniel, Adrian, do you have anything to add to that?
Well, I think I like to add, in Germany, what's happening is it's really, I think for this reason, this kind of episodic work is really kind of coming into the film world, and things in Germany are quite separated. I'd say a lot of people working in broadcasting, and then people work in feature film, and there's not a whole lot of crossover there. And this episodic work, I think, is for that reason really kind of coming into our laps, basically, because I think we approach it in a very, very similar way. I think as a supervising sound editor, it requires a lot more planning because the schedules and deadlines are tricky sometimes, particularly with regards to ADR and that kind of thing. But the approach is very similar. I mean, it's essentially the same approach. I mean, creatively,
they're coming to you because they want a cinematic sound for their streaming content.
Essentially, yeah.
That's also, I mean, it's not just sound, it's all kind of talent that's brought into these shows. I mean, starting with directors, that you want people that like give that kind of like input to the shows, and yeah, and then of course like then you have to meet at some point in between, because there are demands from the networks or from the producers to so it's not, you know, it has to be something that works on a little screen as well. For me, it's always you know, I follow with my sound work. I always follow like the picture, or you know, that's what I adapt to. So I want to find sounds and make my sound so that it works with the picture and makes the picture and become one. So and the picture, you know, like, or the editing or the framing is always a little bit different when you have these like network shows, you know. So that's why also the sound will always be different. Also the music approach is usually a different one, or you don't have so many moments where it's just silent and just music, you know. There's more talking, just the way it's been edited. So I think that's the first thing that's different in the sound, is that not only the sound is different, but the way the sound is used in like in editing or in what's demanded by the framing. And then it's obviously the dynamics that you have to always think about. So when we talk about the wedding, for example, you know, this is a scene that would probably have been more like louder, and if I would have mixed it for cinema, I would have like used more sub bass and more just have been louder at some points, and then which wouldn't have worked. So we had to think of other ways how to tell the dynamics, when to go down, so it's not too obvious, and then you can go up again, and you still have that kind of jump.
So I usually like to end with asking everyone what's a favorite scene from the show? And we've talked about so many great scenes, and but what, you know, if there's a particular scene that when it comes up as you watch the show, it just kind of makes you happy from a sound perspective when it comes up.
I can answer that first. It's the concert in episode, I guess it's episode 3. It's a catnap on stage in the club. I love that. I love the track, and I love to mix it.
That's great.
It was performed live. They had one shooting day, so also the recordings were live, and it was great material to mix, because in the material there was this live I don't know, crispiness or whatever it is. It wasn't a track which we mixed as it could be live. It was performed live, and that was really great to mix.
I'd have to say the wedding scene, just because it was the most challenging, and yeah, it was just the most challenging and fun to put together.
Yeah, there are a couple of scenes. I mean, the first thing that just popped to my mind, I don't know why, and it's not like the most spectacular scene, but somehow there's this moment when Yankee and Moishe are walking through Berlin at night to Hackescher Markt. And so, I don't know, Moishe he's eating something. He got some fruits, and he's just been washing them in a strange way in this kind of plastic bag.
Yes.
And the way he acts, and then he spits out that thing that's just so much him, and it's so you know, he's you know, like, I both like him and dislike him at the same time. I don't know how he did it, but I don't know. It's just popped. This scene is something that stayed with me for a while. So
that's great.
But there are more scenes like the. But yeah.
I'm sorry. I'd like to pick a second, and that would be also the wedding night. I think it's an epic love scene.
An epically awkward love scene, right?
I don't know how many times I watched that, and I would just bust out. It would make me laugh so hard.
That's great. Well, guys, thank you so much for taking the time. I know it's late in the evening in Berlin, and you guys have been working all day, so I appreciate you taking the time to talk with us about Unorthodox, which is a really amazing show with a very lovely, delicate, very specific soundtrack that I think you guys did a fantastic job on. So, Adrian, Daniel, Linus, thanks for joining us, and congratulations on the show.
Thank you
very much, and thanks for having us. It was it's very nice of you to call and ask us to do this. Very nice.
Well,
thank you.
We appreciate giving the attention to a great show like this. So everyone, thanks for joining us and for tuning in. This is Glenn Kaiser signing off from the Dolby Institute and the Soundworks podcast. Thanks very much for tuning in. We'll see you next time. Bye-bye.